We're talking about ADHD and sleep, ADHD and sleep today. And so sleep, when we're looking at, and this is, again, I totally nerded out. I think you guys know I have ADHD and I'm also slightly on the autism spectrum, right? So going into this and learning about the neurons and the receptors and everything was just a nerdy little treat for me. And sleep was so big, especially in regulating our hormones and things like that. And so what we're going to talk about today is just kind of the agenda is why sleep matters. And I know we know sleep matters, right? But what's different in the ADHD brain versus a non-ADHD brain? How to like our circadian rhythms, there's a difference in that. Some statistics about ADHD. And then we're going to talk about what that might look like for you to shift your sleep without it being this like punitive thing or, quote unquote, hard discipline. We don't want to do that. How can we gently shift your sleep schedule and your circadian rhythm so you're actually feeling better? You're not having to use so much discipline. You're not having as much impulse control issues. Your moods are regulated, your hormones are regulated, and it's actually fun, right? So let me ask first, put in the chat, how many hours of sleep do you get per night? What's your typical sleep per night? What's really interesting is depending on your biology, not everyone needs 8 hours. That's the first thing. It can depend on your biology. Some people need 9 hours. Some people need, eight, seven, six. I think six is probably the lowest I've heard of. But there's some people that only need six. And some people in my family, my grandma and my mom would go to bed on time and just wake up naturally. And it could just be your biology. If you're on the autism spectrum, you might have a difference in sleep. I've worked with clients that when they were a kid, some nights they just didn't sleep because our melatonin can be regulated differently, and they'd have a night. And I love this story because he's such a great, I just love him. He's so lovable and such a great guy. And I just picture him as a kid, and his parents would say, okay. And they would just let him play. And he would just play with his toys quietly all night because the brain he didn't want to sleep and he was fine. So there's, again, as a neurodivergent person, there's all kinds of things that could be different about us. That's not the same as somebody else. The main thing we want to look at though is like, are you getting tired during the day? That's one thing. How to know if you're getting enough sleep is probably a good place to start. And so, because we don't want to say, okay, I have to get 8 hours, where when you get 8 hours, maybe you don't feel good. So here are some signs you might need more sleep or you're not at the optimal level. One, you feel irritable or moody really often. You have trouble focusing or remembering things. You rely heavily on caffeine to get through the day. You wake up unrefreshed or exhausted. You get sick more often. Those are some things you feel tired. Now, there is some crossover with ADHD, and what's really interesting is that people who are chronically sleep deprived can sometimes show signs of ADHD, false signs of ADHD. And so if you already have ADHD and you're sleep deprived, the volume is going to be turned up on all of your traits that aren't helpful, right? You're going to feel more irritable or moody or have more trouble with emotion regulation, which is already a part of ADHD. You're going to have more trouble focusing, more trouble remembering things, short-term memory. You're gonna rely on caffeine even more. So some of us with ADHD, do we have anybody that uses caffeine or just loves caffeine? That's really helpful because it's a stimulant, right? Craving caffeine doesn't mean you're sleep deprived. It could be a part of ADHD because it's a stimulant and our brain's needing that. So if you're not using medication or you don't have a stimulant some other way, you could use caffeine and it could just be stimulating your brain and helping you work. So there's a difference between, that depending on whether it's sleep deprivation or you're just dopamine seeking, right? Or you need stimulants. Waking up unrefreshed or exhausted. So the other thing that I've noticed too, coaching for this long, is that because we can have trouble with sleep and we can be lighter sleepers, and is that sometimes we have sleep disorders, but we're so used to being sleep deprived, we don't even get it checked. So sleep apnea is something that I've noticed a couple clients had a bunch of sleep issues and thought it was their ADHD that was like stopping them from everything. And then they figured out they had sleep apnea, got treatment, and then their ADHD got way better and they were able to be really efficient. So if you're chronically exhausted or you wake up and it's just really difficult and it's not your baseline, right? Think of if it's always been like this since you were a kid and you're 10 years old and you were always groggy when you woke up, then it might not be a sleep disorder. Sometimes those are more late onset. So just figuring out what is your baseline and playing with stuff. So those are just some indicators that you might need more sleep. If you get 6 hours a day, but you're not tired and you feel okay, then you might be okay with 6 hours of sleep. It just depends on your biology. Menopause can have a big effect on sleep as well. And just as a reminder, if you are going through menopause or you're getting older and you feel like your ADHD is getting worse, ADHD is not progressive. It doesn't get worse. And so that's a really good indication to get hormones checked because menopause and hormones can absolutely affect your sleep at a high level. If you have really low T levels as a man as well. So we want to look at that. That's part of the ADHD reset I was talking about as well. Again, like I said, for neurotypical people in a state of sleep deficit, the brain can actually mimic some ADHD traits. So if you have ADHD and you're sleep deprived, it's going to be a lot harder, right? And when you do get your sleep dialed in, you're going to have more energy to do the positive things like exercise. You're going to decrease chances of any kind of cognitive decline or dementia or Alzheimer's, anything like that. It's going to be a big change in your mood and depression if you have any of that anxiety. So some stats, 50 to 75% of people with ADHD have sleep issues. So if you said that you don't get 8 hours or 9 hours or whatever you need to get, you are part of the norm. So there's 4 different things that people with ADHD typically struggle with around sleep. One is going to be difficulty falling asleep. So who has trouble? And I'm going to go through. So it's difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, difficulty with waking up in the middle of the night, and then also having a sleep disorder. So those are kind of the core 4 things. And you may just struggle with going to sleep and then you're okay. Or you may be able to go to sleep and then you wake up. Or you are good going to sleep, you can sleep like a rock, but you can't wake up. So I'm curious, let's do a little survey if you want. You can raise your hand or type it in the chat. Or use your electronic hand, but who has difficulty falling asleep? There's something called revenge bedtime procrastination. I want to throw this out there and we're going to talk about it. Revenge bedtime procrastination is a thing, and that is when it gets to be bedtime and then we don't want to stop doing the fun thing. Right. So we might watch a show too long. It's like the time when finally the world quiets down and people aren't asking demands and you can finally breathe. Sometimes for some of us, it's the one time we get to regulate ourselves, right? And we get a break from sensory and from demands and we can regulate our emotions. It's like, oh my gosh, I can breathe. I don't want to go unconscious to wake up and have all the demands again. So revenge bedtime procrastination is a thing. One of the things with that is we want to make sure we are putting some time in your day to regulate. Because if you're not giving yourself any free time to let your brain play or to chase dopamine a little bit or to have fun or watch the TV show, the trashy TV show or play the video game or just listen to music, whatever you like to do, of course, your brain is going to make you take time before bed. So we want to make sure that we're actually blocking that time in, and that's part of our reset protocol is to have that time in to avoid the revenge bedtime procrastination, because you can get into this cycle that I want to talk about for a second with sleep and hormones and chemicals is let me know if you've ever experienced this, right? So you do the revenge bedtime procrastination, then you finally gets to a certain point, whether that's like midnight, whether it's 2 a.m., 3 a.m., where finally you've reached the threshold where you're like, oh my gosh, I should go to bed, whatever that number is for you, where it finally creates enough urgency. And then you sleep in longer than you want to instead of getting up in the morning, and then you're behind. And then you start your day and then you feel like, oh my gosh, there's so many emails or so many tasks, or I'm so behind. And then we can get really overwhelmed and we kind of shut down or freeze because we're overstimulated or it's too much or we feel like overwhelmed. Right. Okay. So Raquel feels that too. And then we finally catch up and then you go out throughout your day and you might start feeling better later in the day. Maybe it's the afternoon. You finally caught up. Okay, I can do this. You feel better. But you've been busting your butt and then it's time to wind down. You haven't had any time and it's actually been really stressful. And then you go to bed late again. So we're getting in this cycle. And the other thing that can happen, right, with ADHD is we have delayed circadian rhythm. Not all, but a lot. I think it's about 75%. So we're actually normally going to get tired 2 hours later than a neurotypical person. And we're going to wake up 2 hours later in the morning. You can totally shift this. It's just kind of our baseline, right? So yeah, who here is and it's not everybody, but I'm curious, who's more of a night owl? Who's a night owl? Who's more of, all right, we see that. There's a good lot of night owls. Okay. Um, who is more of a morning person? Who's a morning person? And then who's a crazy person like me who's both? Who can go on not much sleep? Is there anybody who can be both? It's kind of wild. Okay, we have one heart. I don't know. That's how I used to be, but it's getting better now. Well, I mean, like my sleep's regulated now, but it used to be both and just chronic sleep deprivation. So my brain turns on at 5 p.m. Yeah. So some of us can have productivity windows that are in the evening or even like 1 or 2 a.m. That can happen as well, and it can shift. So you can also have that, and it's hard sometimes because like I'm finally productive, I'm finally regulated, those things. And so by shifting your bedtime a little bit, if you're a night owl, you can kind of play with it. That can help reset that. That does not mean you have to join the 5 a.m. club. So the other thing I want to say is it's not the ultimate to wake up at 5 or 6 a.m. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be successful. That's a whole bunch of nah. That's not true. And I've seen many high level people prove that. For example, at one of our panels at a big live in person event, we had someone who's doing like 6 million in gross commission a year. It was insane. Donated, was it like 600 something thousand dollars to charity? And she would wake up at 8 a.m. every morning, and then she wouldn't work out until in the afternoon or evening. And she was in great shape. So you don't have to. It's just what is your ideal window of sleep? That's really what it is. What is the ideal window where you're not waking up to a bunch of demands and overwhelm, but you're also not forcing yourself to get up if you're really night owl? If that's when you're productive and it works, who cares? Right? The main thing is that you do the legion, you do the tasks you need to do, you build the business. Whether you do that at 5 a.m., 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 a.m., it doesn't really matter, right? We just want to look at, are you getting enough sleep, whatever window that is? Are you being productive? And that's the main thing. So it is not the ultimate. You don't have to wake up super early. And I say that because people always feel relieved, but you can be wildly successful as long as you do the action during the day. And so we want you well rested. One thing I want to talk about too that can happen if you are who feels like they're chronically sleep deprived right now? They just feel like they're chronically sleep deprived. Okay. Who feels pretty good? Who feels pretty good? Chronically sleep deprived people, this is a cycle we can get in. So when we don't have sleep, what happens biologically is our body, we need to go about our day, right? So our body to help us, because if we didn't have enough sleep, we're tired, right? Our body sends cortisol, the stress hormone, all throughout our body because we need that, right? So back in the day, if we didn't have sleep deprivation, we needed cortisol to run away from the bear, to survive, all those things. So when you're chronically sleep deprived, to compensate for that fatigue, your body gets this cortisol influx, right? And endorphins, and that's going to give you some dopamine. Because dopamine is the fuel to go. So if you're chronically sleep deprived, and that's a pattern, it creates cortisol. What cortisol does, it's a stress hormone. So you're going to be, when you go to bed at night, if you have cortisol going through your body, it's a lot harder to go to sleep, right? If you're running on cortisol because you're sleep deprived, and the body says, I mean, hey, we're chronically sleep deprived, so we have this stress hormone, and now go unconscious and just relax, right? So you can get in this cycle of running on cortisol sometimes for years if you don't intervene. If you don't intervene, because you can do it, you can function, but over time, having that cortisol year after year after year is going to create inflammation in your body. It's going to stress, I mean, your adrenals, fatigue, all kinds of stuff. So that you don't want high cortisol for extended periods of time. And so shifting that's going to be really pivotal in the best way you can. The other thing that happened with sleep deprivation is we are going to be more dopamine seeking. So if you're chronically sleep deprived, you are going to crave certain foods that maybe you know aren't healthy. You're going to crave high dopamine activities. You're going to crave shopping, impulse buys, impulsive decisions, higher risk. You might take a chance. You might blow money on the stock market. You might blow money on something you don't need because your brain's needing dopamine. It's deprived of that as well. You're more likely to go for unhealthy relationships, intermittent reinforcement, substance. If you have a substance abuse history, you're more likely to relapse. So this is why sleep for a lot with ADHD doesn't always sound fun. And, we've heard, okay, sleep, I know. And I just, what was important today is to create a full picture of like why this matters, right? Create some urgency because it really does. It really does. Another thing is going to sleep, we can have tons of thoughts, right? People with ADHD studies show up 10 times the amount of thoughts as neurotypical people. We can ruminate, we can overanalyze, which can create more stress or cortisol and have trouble for us going to sleep as well. And so it's interesting, right? We're more likely to have PTSD. So sometimes people can have flashbacks. And so it's important to you've heard me, be curious about what is stopping you from going to sleep versus punishment or discipline, because that is not very sustainable and it's not very fun. And so we want to look at those things, what we can do about that. So a couple of things that you want to pay attention to when we're looking at sleep is sensory environment, right? Because we can have more sensitivity to sensory input. So are your sheets soft or are they scratchy? What's the temperature? Do you have a comfortable mattress? Is there light coming in or not? Is there things plugged in right by your head and you're actually sensitive to that? Is there next to your bed is your computer? Are you used to working in bed? So your bed is not associated with sleep. Do you have piles of stuff? Do you have clutter, right? What can you do even if it's just one room in the house that you can preserve as a place to just let go, to rest, to not have things all around you, right, that are stressing you out that you're looking at. So those are just a couple things. Also, when we're going to bed, I want to see, there's a bedtime routine. It's called the 3-2-1-0. So this is what they recommend is 3 hours before bed, no food or alcohol. If you are eating like meat, I have a health and wellness degree, but if you're eating meat or something that's harder to digest, that can actually keep you up. And it actually, if you've ever had that, if you had a steak and went right to bed, that can affect your sleep. Alcohol can affect your sleep depending on who you are. So 3 hours before bed, no food or alcohol, ideally. This is not a hard, fast rule, right? You can try it. 2 hours before bed, no more work. So we want to just calm down the cortisol, start to wind down, bring your nervous system down, right? We have a more sensitive nervous system. So we want to pull that, we want to just start to wind down our nervous system. And then 1 hour before bed, ideally no more screen time. So I want to talk about that for a second. And then zero is go to bed, right? So 3 hours before bed, no food or alcohol. Again, if you want to shift that to 2 hours, whatever that is, but just having an intention where you're not eating right up until bed could be helpful for you. 2 hours before bed, stop work. And then 1 hour before bed, ideally get rid of screens because it actually, the blue light on our screens, what it does is it prevents our brain and our body from producing melatonin, which is the thing that helps us get naturally tired. So who, and I want to talk about this because we don't want to just strip away screens, right? So who here is typically on screens before bed, especially phone, let's say. So some of this sleep stuff is just shifting habits. It may not even be ADHD, right? It might be some of our habits that are a quick fix. And I want to talk about this. Remember, we can be a little like black and white sometimes when we want to follow the rules. And I'm going to give you permission to bend the rules too. What we want to do is this is all tools you can use to make yourself go to sleep. If something doesn't work for you, let's say you have PTSD and the one thing that works is playing video games before you go to bed to stop your thoughts and that's how you go to sleep, do it, right? But if you're doom scrolling and you're just chasing dopamine and you're like, no, you shouldn't be doing it, it's not helpful and you keep doing it, that I would pull. Right? That I would pull. Or food stuff. If you've had issues with restricting food in the past and it's a trigger for you to have a rigid rule around food, then maybe you don't do the rule of a couple hours before bed. So again, take this with these are tools to use, but they're not an absolute where you have to follow everything. It's like maybe you try one thing, right? The screen, I want to talk about that for a second. That is dopamine, right? And so if we pull screens or you stop working, and I'll give you a tip for this. Some of you have had me talk about this, but you can get an outlet timer. Sometimes I use them for Christmas lights or fish tanks, but it's an outlet timer and you can set where you can plug the Wi-Fi in. And as soon as that clicks to 10 p.m. or whenever your wind down time is, it's going to turn off Wi-Fi all throughout the house. So we have some people who do that because it's easier with kids too, right? If they're on playing Fortnite or they're on the computer, whatever, it's like, hey, as a family, let's decide what time does the Wi-Fi go off because we're going to start winding down. So that can be a helpful thing as well. If we are taking something away that is producing dopamine, what I suggest to you is to give yourself something else. So one of the things when we're looking at this is we don't want to just have all these restrictions and discipline. That doesn't really work for ADHD. We want to give you something else. And so if you're going to pull away screen time and that's been a thing for you, then maybe you give yourself something fun like an adult coloring book, or maybe you buy a record player and play records or enjoy that, or music. You do something like that, or maybe you play games, or you have a book that you really like, or something. And the idea is with the screens is to stop the blue light because we want to get the melatonin on a natural schedule. That's the idea. So here's the thing I'll say to this, and this is I grew up part in the Midwest and part in the South. This is a saying we say in the South. I've lived there for I don't know how many, almost 20 years. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. Right. So if you have a routine and you are on screens, but it's not causing issues, you don't need to fix it. If you are eating, but it's not causing you issues, you don't need to fix it. This is something to try. Right. And so I just want to say that because again, we can, if you're like me, we can go very all or nothing or extreme, and then it feels like this restrictive thing, or it feels really intense, and then it's not sustainable. Or we might pull something that's working because we're trying to do the neurotypical way, and really what we're doing worked for us. So I would say play with this, right? You could make a list, right? Like a brain dump list. If you have racing thoughts, do a huge brain dump and just dump everything out. You could set intentions for the day. You could write a gratitude list. You could do like solitaire or cards, something that's going to help you. And so that could be a really good thing. Yeah. So there's different things we can do. So yeah, you can wear a sleep mask. That's definitely an option. If you have sensory stuff and a sleep mask is too much, then you wouldn't. Blackout curtains can be really, really helpful, especially if you're on the spectrum. They've done studies that show light coming in, any kind of even little light from, electronics or anything, the TV, even if the TV's off, but the light's on, sometimes that can affect our melatonin. This is if you're more hypersensitive, maybe on the spectrum. So it's kind of it's just super interesting, right? So turn off the big lights, figure out what works for you. The key though is that we want to start to wind our nervous system down. Remember, we have a more sensitive nervous system, and we have to manually sometimes rev it up, right? To do the thing, to get off the couch, to take action. Once we're doing it, we're fine. And we have to also rev it down sometimes. And we're going to do that manually more than someone else. And that transition from going from, revved up to revved down sometimes can be more difficult for us. So we want to ease it in and just figure out what works for you. What works for you the best can be really helpful. Somebody mentioned the phone in the other room. So remember, we can have impulse control stuff. So if you have trouble not touching your phone, like leaving your phone away alone, and it's actually not helpful, right? It is broken. You do want to fix it, right? If it isn't broken, don't fix it. But if it is an issue, having your phone in another room so you can't just pick it up is really a helpful thing. And you can get a alarm. I have one of these. It's it like mimics nature, and it has sounds, and then it's like a what is it, sunrise alarm clock. So the light turns on really light, and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter to kind of mimic the sun rising. And then you have nature sounds or birds chirping. So that can be a helpful thing. Like you can find all kinds of tools, but the thing is, you can make this fun. Right? This is not some punitive thing where you got to restrict and be disciplined and go to bed on time. And this is the rule. It's like, hey, how can I take care of myself? Right? What can I do? Can I get sheets that are really fun, or pajamas that have certain design on them, like holidays or something? Can I get let me go to TJ Maxx or something and feel all the sheets and which one feels like so soft to me. And then maybe I can get a meditation that I play as I go to sleep, or some kind of soothing voice, or books on tape. We want to make this fun. We want to make it dopamine producing. And that's what I found as a coach from all these years, is that it's not about restricting and discipline and getting it together and being harsh on yourself. It's how can we make taking care of yourself and doing the things you want to do fun and enjoyable. How that's what life is about, right? And there's so much joy and dopamine that we can get from taking care of ourselves and loving ourselves and getting good sleep and creating this really nice environment for ourselves. Lack of sensory before I fall asleep makes my brain wake up because I feel like I'm underwater and then I'm up until it calms down again. So, and this is such a great example. Thank you for sharing that. So some of us we might need a little bit more stimulation to regulate, right? So if there's anybody who goes to sleep with the TV on and it helps you and you feel refreshed the next day and you get good sleep, keep the TV on, you know? That's what I would say. And so she is aware of her brain. She's saying lack of sensory before I fall asleep makes my brain wake up. So you could try a white noise machine where you've got sensory input. You could try meditation. You could try music if you haven't already. But I think honoring that, Neva, is going to be really helpful. So what does it look like for you to honor the sensory needs that you have and still be able to sleep? And I would play with different things. A hatch alarm clock. Yes, a hatch alarm clock can be great. So Judy plays light music on Alexa for a limited time, like 15 minutes. White noise machines. I know sensory wise is having a fan on and feeling the breeze. And then other people sensory wise, that's too much. Other people that feels really nice or they feel claustrophobic if they don't have it on, you know? So you can do that. Magnesium that we'll get more into some of the supplements that you can take on the next call as well. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of things we can do, right? It's not just, okay, I have trouble sleeping. I'm kind of, this is it. It's no, like there's so many fun things that we can try that are new, that are dopamine producing, that are exciting. And so that could be really helpful. Somebody asked, what is the hatch alarm clock? So the hatch alarm clock can do the sunrise simulation as well. It has audio, so you could do bird song, chimes. It plays white noise, brown noise, and then you can link it to your phone and have kind of wind down routines with guided meditations, or you can do sleep stories or reading lights. So for us, what's really helpful is to plan ahead of time or have a routine that we have and then program that in, right? Because if the structure is already there, we're not going to need discipline or impulse control in the moment. So that can be really cool as well. So yeah, we kind of want to work with what works with our brain. So sleep is important. Having a routine, and I want to just summarize, make it sensory friendly, right? Make it a bed that you want to get into, some clean sheets, some nice pajamas. We want to have things that are dopamine producing that help us wind down our nervous system. We want to avoid that revenge time, bedtime procrastination by having some time in the day to actually breathe and have fun, even if it's 30 minutes of a window to do that. So we're not doing that at night right before bed because we never gave it to ourselves. Right. And we want to find ways to give ourselves sleep that's not just discipline and restricting and, creating demands of ourselves. So we're going to do part 2, but really, again, with this, right, with ADHD, 50 to 75% of people with ADHD have sleep issues. So be patient with yourself. If it doesn't work the first night, just say, okay, I'm going to close my eyes and rest, even if I can't sleep because I've had insomnia. And so we talked a little bit about falling asleep, some of that stuff. We're going to talk next time about some of the supplements, how to stay asleep, some things like that. I'm also going to talk about histamine, which can actually keep you awake and have trouble falling asleep. And then we're going to talk about how to wake up because we've got people that have trouble with that. Some common sleep disorders. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. And then if you want to go even more in depth and do this with us, then check out the group program. All right. Well, have a wonderful day. I hope that you sleep well. And if not, you close your eyes and rest and don't beat yourself up because we're going to get you there. And yeah, we'll see you next week unless you're in our group plan. Okay. Take care, everybody.